Coming up on Theater Talk.
The great thing I love about theater is every time you go to bat, the odds are against you.
Yeah.
So whenever anyone's being really arrogant, you just go, see you next time, Charlie.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And we're already laughing because we have one of the funniest men in show business as our guest tonight. Douglas Carter Beane has written some of the best comedies in the last several years here in New York, including As Bees and Honey Drown, the terrific The Little Dog Laughed, and that classic of the American musical theater, Xanadu. He is back off Broadway with an effervescent but slightly sad new play called Mr. and Mrs. Fitch, about a subject near and dear to my heart, gossip columnists and gossip column writing. Welcome back to Theater Talk, Douglas.
It's good to be back. And I don't have usually have some little knife in my back when I introduce me of some clip of somebody mocking me. So it's great to just come without any mockery at all. I'm very touched and excited.
Well, the play hasn't opened yet, so don't worry.
I know. Well, that's the great thing about show business.
But before we get to Mr. and Mrs. Fitch, we were talking about your triumph in London with The Little Dog Laughed, and you were telling me that once upon a time all the critics over there seemed to hate you, but now they've all come around to embrace you.
I think every critic everywhere, the first time they get a dose of all that is Beane, really consider it the end of civilization. And then the second time around they go, oh, I get it. He's making fun of the end of civilization.
He's merely prescient.
While he's participating in it. Now I get it. No, it was Charles Spencer who was not so nice to Xanadu.
A friend of ours who's a critic for the Daily Telegraph.
And he gave me like one of the best reviews of my life. And the critics were, because when I saw them, I said, my God, these reviews are so mixed. And they were like, no, actually all the papers that people buy are raves. And the reviews are bad, or like crazy people. And I've since had time to kind of read about them, and they're sort of hilarious nutters.
So you're the toast of London now, are you?
I am well on my way to world nomination.
I just want to ask you for a second, though, about critics, because you seem to be one of the few people in the business who doesn't get too rattled when they punch you out. I mean, what's your philosophy about critics?
I do pretty well by critics. I mean, by critics, I mean people who do it for a living and it's on a piece of paper.
Right.
Because they tend to have some amount of accountability and actually tend to think of me as a playwright and not someone who's irritating their evening. But the people with the blogs, it's a new world. And then the chat rooms is a whole other world that I'm sort of getting, trying to understand and comprehend. But no, I've actually done pretty well. Even John Simon was kind of nice to me. I've had the hilariously worst things ever said to me when I was starting out. But usually the first time they hate me, and then the second time they like me, and the third time they begrudgingly have to admit I appear not to be wanting to quit, or I keep keeping.
You
Hollywood.
stay in the theater. You haven't run away to do movies and television.
Which means I never get the profile at New York Times. It's like if I left and did a TV show and then came back, it's like I'd get the full profile. But I've dedicated my life to theater, and then the Times that is going. So what are we going to do with that?
We just get a little capsule review in the listings.
If I'm really, it's basically exactly.
Now, speaking of journalism, your new play, Mr. and Mrs. Fitch, is about a husband and wife gossip column team here in New York, working for old media, working for a paper that seems to kind of resemble...
Old media, by that I mean wood-based?
Yeah, wood-based media, exactly. What got you thinking about writing a play about a gossip column?
Well, I'm interested in what other people are interested in more than I'm interested in terms of writing. And I know that people are obsessed with gossip. And I find it sort of interesting, but I don't find it overwhelmingly compelling. And there's television, and I just saw that there was this world of print gossip and how it was sort of being taken over by blogs and internet and
TMZ
and how it all suddenly got really ugly, really gross, and things that I grew up with, like Liz Smith and Earl Wilson, and to suddenly see Perez Hilton with drawing cocaine and people coming out of people's nose, going sniff, sniff, cokehead, and you go, wow, we really. So one day you look up and things have taken a turn. And then how the celebrity worship allows us to not concern ourselves with what's really going on with America. That was interesting to me. So
do you know some gossip columnists who you base these characters on?
Because socially I'll meet someone like you, and I won't take a swing at you, or I'll meet Michael Musto,
Yeah.
and then Liz Smith. I sort of know, and I sort of took something I could find from every one of them and combined them into also this idealized world of New York that I sort of came to New York and really feel that I need to sue some people by being tremendously let down by what it really is.
But they're in this glamorous
Yeah.
party going.
It was the ultimate glamour. The world of glamour was also something I want to talk about. How we have this idealized of Cole Porter and skylines out of skylights and people tossing around bonbons in their pajamas.
And you say, all the world's a banquet.
Yeah, that's a paraphrase of
Yes.
Annie Mame. Life is a banquet, and most poor sons of bitches aren't invited. Which is my view of New York. It's really like
Now, are there characteristics of gossip columnists? Are there prime characteristics of gossip columnists that you found?
Slimy, disgusting.
No, I wish they were. I think that new generation is.
Yeah.
Press Helton has been kind of nice to me, but I still don't know if I'd shake his hand because I'm a little afraid. But like for this show, like Michael Musto,
Love him, yes.
I took something that happened when I was when I was still in a small town where this girl who was in a restaurant had a crush on Michael Musto from reading his column and said that she was going to go to New York and marry him, and I thought that was misguided. But fascinating, and so I actually stole that in the play.
That's right.
From a gentleman by the name of Michael Riedel. I stole that he actually has this incredible love of literature and knows theater and real writers and quotes them with me, but not anywhere else.
I'm flattered, thank you.
But then from Liz Smith, I got the kind of really
Good loft.
sloppy apartment, with like releases everywhere and like first copies of books that aren't out yet everywhere. And
What is interesting, though, about the theme in the play is indeed this notion that these two people really are in love with a world where the gossip columnists were people like Walter Winchell, people like Leonard Lyons, where Sardi's was the hub of things. And you get the sense that they came to New York expecting that. And they got the tail end of it, and now it's dribbled away, and they're still trying to live in this past that is no longer.
yeah, I think a lot of theater people in my generation sense that. Like when I first came to New York and I was working as a backstage doorman and all those kind of working and selling headsets, was you would get Lillian Hellman at an opening night.
Yeah.
I mean, she looked like the tree from The Wizard of Oz, but it was Lillian Hellman. It was. I had a little theater company for a decade. We were throwing plays up in Greenwich Village, and like Arthur Miller would show up.
Yeah.
And now, when I talk to young theater students or something, and I say these names, I might as well be saying Fado.
Yeah.
They're just such a bygone era.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think we grew up in a world of Sardis and doormen, and it goes away. And
Well, that
who do
glamour
they-
and that elegance, too, that seems to be completely missing.
the
from it
only
all.
plus side I can think of is that you can use a credit card in a cab now.
Other than that, it's been downhill since
I think it's
Sardi's
what-
went tourist.
Basic civility, whatever. It left. I'm going to have to put up with that. But Swink, I'm happy.
Well, who are your young students in awe of?
It depends on. I kind of talk to colleges every once in a
Yeah,
while
yeah.
because they haven't really read my police reports. No, because it's interesting to them. But it depends. Like there's a great reverence for Kushner as well. There should be, and
Beane, is there a big Beane
well,
reference?
I know. My partner, who's a composer, was brought in to do music for a piece, and he called me and said, "You won't believe this, but they are teaching you in a course at Colgate University."
Really?
And I said, I could not get into Colgate University. That sort of is, not Ivy, but wow. Still, I'm thinking they're not going to course of America. So, yeah, there are people who come up and speak admiringly to me, and it's I function better as a writer with a hint of disdain, just because it makes me angry enough to write. On this show, Mr. and Mrs. Fitch, it was John Lithgow and Jennifer Ely, who are both second-generation theater people.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they
know this world
They
that's
know
lost.
this world, and they know it, and they treat me with a respect that's daunting.
And they would all have been there when Sardi's was the place where everybody went.
And I was at Sardi's 2 nights ago, so it's not so.
Who was there?
It was dead empty. No, it's scary. I like starting. I love those old things, and I think we always look for those touchstones. That's why we get freaked out when they tear an old theater down.
Where did you get that love of old stuff? When you were growing up, were you reading The Columnist and thinking I would like to be part of this world?
Yeah, I think that was part of it. I was reading, I was, sort of a freshman in high school and having a bad time. And
Where were you?
In Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, which is a great town to have a bad time in, if you really want to choose one. And I would go to the local municipal library and rent the Noel Coward 2 CD and listen to them and play them on my headset and become a thorn in the sides of everyone in my high school for 4 years and just love it and know it, and just the movies and all that sort of imagery would come at me about what New York was, and then I came to New York in '77, which was the absolute depths of a bad, I think we were in a depression, not really even a recession. It was garbage floating in the streets. It was awful, but it was, but I was going to see Bubbling Brown Sugar, so it was all kind of working out fine.
Yeah.
And a great play was,
And it was the tail end of the glamour era, because Studio 54 may have been the last of the, even though it was sort of that drug scene and all that, but 54 had glamour, did it not, when you came
I
here?
think it did. I mean, I went to Studio, that was the disco era, and then sort of punk came in, and then there was one little resurgence that was kind of like Michael Musto's prime time of his...
The party the party kids, what are they called?
Yeah,
the club kids.
The club kids,
Yes.
that whole thing, and I was kind
Until
of...
that unfortunate murder.
Yeah, which Michael
Yeah.
Musto, that's like some of his best writing
yes.
was actually revealing that in that period.
Yeah.
What was the murder? You have to.
Oh, the party. It was a movie with.
Well, it was
Macaulay
a movie with
Culkin.
Macaulay Culkin, but you
That's
get
all you
ahead
need
of
to know.
No, you get ahead of the fact that one of the chiefs, the club kids, who were these young people who dressed up and go around all the clubs, murdered. It was a drug thing. Murdered somebody very
A boy named
brutally
Angel.
and threw him in the river or something.
But Michael Musto was actually like doing them in blind items, like getting the information out. Like,
was.
there's this boy who's missing, and we think he's been murdered, to the police. But in it was also gossip that was totally fake, and everyone knew it too. So it was a wild time. But that was to me the end of it. And now it's like I do say when young people are on the show, like, where are you guys going? Where do you go out? And they don't. They just go on the
Go
internet.
on the internet. They look at their. I want to ask you. You wrote about gossip columnists.
Yeah.
You're a gossip columnist. What drives?
With a very good library.
But you must. Oh, come on.
What drives these people, though, to kind of ghoulishly look into other people's lives and write about it without any compunction?
Do you want to handle that one, Doug?
I'm looking at you.
Well, I don't. I think that. I think for someone who works in the theater, I'm always sort of impressed at the things Michael doesn't write about. I think there's some really sad stories out there, and he sort of tastefully steps aside. And usually, with when I read Michael stuff, it's usually ego run amok. I mean, that's really you just kind of delighting in someone making me like, I'm the biggest baba in the world,
The greatest producer of all time.
yeah, and you just go, it's the great thing I love about theater is every time you go to bat, the odds are against you.
Yeah.
So whenever anyone's being really arrogant, you just go, see you next time, Charlie.
Yeah.
Because you're going to collapse. It's going to happen. The most you can hope for is having something to say that means something to you and work with people who are lovely and interesting and fascinating, or at the very least, complicated and funny.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's it. Everything else, like the money. Now there's this whole thing about like the show isn't a success unless it pays back, and it's like, great. I'm glad they've come up with these new rules.
Well, that's a Michael Riedel thing, that it's a flop unless
Well,
it
but I
pays
think
back.
though,
So Follies was is like
a disaster, one of the
whole
worst of all
time,
time.
which is probably the most influential musical ever.
But
So,
the thing though is, if you're writing about certainly the theater, as you well know, because you're a case in point, it's full of colorful characters. So why would I not want to make them colorful in my column? I mean, when you're writing about Fran and Barry Weissler, these producers, they're going to be up to all kinds of fun stuff.
I will have Fran Weissler will call me and say, "Honey, let's have lunch." Done.
Yeah, you're right.
Because she will her view of and the story she tells.
She's the producer of Chicago.
Yeah.
She's the producer of Chicago's theater legend. Why don't we get a little scrolling on CNN and describe what we're talking about?
But I mean, as someone who writes about the theater, I don't know how you could do it. Actually, you can do it. We would write the way the New York Times does. You make the theater sound really boring.
But sometimes
there are so many fascinating people, and as you know, on any show, a big enterprise like this, there are bound to be collisions of these egos, and that is that's fun to write about.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really, I've been kind of close to working on something like that. Everything else everything I've worked on has really felt like Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney in a settlement house, like
Well,
in a
you're
barn.
lucky, yeah.
In a barn, we're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Everything has always felt. I mean, I always thought it was funny when his Bees and Honey Drown, when people talk about the blue shirt that they have to have, which is in the stage direction. It was the director, Mark Brokaw, brought in a blue shirt, and we both liked it, and we put it on Josh Hamilton and said, that looks great.
The rest is history.
And the rest is now everyone going, what does the blue shirt symbolize? You know, and people writing
at Colgate,
they're writing a thesis on it right now. But it's always been that. So it's always been fun. But I've never had. No one's ever thrown too much money at me. You know, I mean, in the joke of Xanadu was we didn't even have enough money for 9 muses. I mean, it was so cheap.
What I'm asking about is the lure of writing about people with some kind of ridicule, or looking into their private foibles. I mean, we all understand why we are laughing about John Edwards, because he was so
hypocritical.
But there are people who are just sort of out there and they get.
Well, there is. I mean,
attacked.
there's a phenomenon of which is mentioned in the play of someone who's going to sit there and tell me how wonderful their projects are, and I get to embroider innuendo about their personal lives.
Yeah.
That's what we want. We want to build someone up. You can almost set your watch to it. Like, here we go. Now we're building up. It's time to start tearing them down.
This is what I do with Broadway shows all the time.
Here we go. Tear it down, tear it down, tear it down. Like, and that is part of who we are as Americans, because we like people. We like people to be homey. We like people to be regular. But part of who we are, we're very defensive and we're very angry of anyone who's more successful. So we're kind of going to tear that down a little bit. So that is the phenomenon, and it's so why I love about theater is that you can never get too big. You can go off. I'll tell you a movie story. I got handed in a draft of a film. Person, executive goes, Doug Beane, best draft, love it, fabulous, hangs up the phone. But it was one of the things where they didn't hang up the phone. I had a headset on back then, and they patched me in, and I listened to their 5 next phone calls. And there was 5 different actresses, movie stars, and they went, we just got in the new Douglas Carter Beane draft. It's fabulous. You have to play this. You're the only person who can play this. You're the only actress with the depth, the understanding, the beauty. If this is a meritocracy. Yeah, and what was fascinating is those 5 actresses never said, stop it. You're pulling my leg, that's too much.
They just wanted to hear it.
They went, It was a salve on a wound.
So how could you stay
Daddy
safe?
didn't give him hugs, and this woman was going to give them. So that's what there is this sort of, in film and TV you can get that, but you can't really in theater. It's like one matinee and you're down to earth, baby. One good bed.
The one thing I would say, it's interesting in your play, though, about how gossip has changed. You know, we, at least in the old newspaper world, we put our names to it, all right? We put our names to it.
Yes.
We live with it. If it's wrong, we got to correct it. I try to make corrections in a funny way. You know, you do that sort of stuff. But your name is on it. You now have the chat rooms, the gossip in the chat rooms, all about your show and previews now. And it's all anonymous. All anonymous sniping. Anybody can say anything, and you have no recourse.
Like the chat rooms, first of all, people think I'm in the chat rooms because I've said I've done them, and I just want to say chat rooms are really like pornography. I'll look at it, but I ain't doing it. And they go through cycles. Like sometimes they're actually really interesting. Yeah. Right now we're at a very bad period of the chat rooms where they're just not interesting and funny, but sometimes they are amusing. What is interesting is that there's a lot of anger because people will go to see a show, like a show of mine particularly, and everyone around them will be laughing. And if you're not laughing, it angers you. It's like either I'm not getting it or everyone around me is stupid. So they'll go in, and this is their release, is to go into this anonymous room and say, Douglas Carter Beane, blah, 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 he's awful, it's awful, it's awful, the show's awful. Then someone will come along 3 days later and say, you know, I saw that show, and it's actually really good.
And that's not you?
No, that's not me. That's my press agent. No, and then then that person comes back from like 2 weeks later, you're drunk! I hate you! And you just go, you must be a fun house. You know, I just envision them eating the big, you know, Twinkies, just eating one Twinkie after another in their underwear, typing away.
Yeah, well, they certainly have influence. But we're running out of time, but one last point about the play, I think that gets to a sort of a sad point in the play, is that these are people who, that Mr. and Mrs. Fitch, gossip columnists, would be perceived by the outside world as really being at the pinnacle of success in Manhattan, and yet they themselves feel completely trapped in a job that they really don't want anymore.
Michael, do you want to address that? Do you have a novel you're working on, perhaps?
Well, they are working on a novel. I am not.
But,
I am not.
The thing I'll say, knowing you, is that you're always happiest when you know what your story is going to be. When you would have to fish around for a story, you're unhappy.
Yes, well, listen, as a reporter, you're always happy when you think, I've got it.
Yeah.
I've got the story.
Well, that's what.
And when you don't have it, you think all is
And when
doomed.
you don't have it, you think it's all lost. The jig is up. They're going to find out that I'm a fraud until you find the story.
And that's in your plan.
And that's when you just pick a show out of town and go like, okay, you suck.
Exactly.
Whatever. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Score by Sondheim. Suck. It doesn't matter. No, I mean, I think for those of us not working in the truth-based community, in the wonderful world of fiction, it's a similar thing as that we do when we feel, as a writer friend of mine says, I'm with play. You know, it's like you do feel like I got it. I can do this. I can run with this. I can say something with this.
And you're in the midst of now, you're in previews with the show. Are you the kind of writer who you will fix and patch and fiddle? Do you rewrite up?
The day this was taped, a new ending goes in tonight.
Really?
Salmonella poisoning. Do you think it's too much? The tuna salad. I just curtain. I want a big blast at the end. No, it's the same ending, but it's a neater, cooler way of ending it. Yeah, I mean, I had to put a new line into Xanadu last week. The national tour is out there, and they come and said, like, we're playing this town, and we need a new line. And I said, great, wrote it, sent it. So yeah, you're always sort of.
But that's the best way to make theater. I mean, just on a practical basis, you got to solve a problem and fix it, and that's it.
Well, that's why I love theater, is that it's nothing but a set of broken toys that you kind of have to fix and get on to next.
And you don't finish shows, you abandon them, right?
No, you never abandon them. You keep writing.
You keep writing.
One of my little jobs was someone was doing a revival, I think, of The Crucible, and Arthur Miller took the DPS version and was writing stuff in the margin and crossing it out. Really? And that would have been like 1984, I think. So I think you're always sort of looking at it, keeping it good, giving it your best effort, because you love it so much, and you love when people connect with it. It's one of the better things in life.
Well, Douglas Carter Beane, thank you for being our guest tonight on Theater Talk.
Xanadu's over your right shoulder.
Classic of the American musical theater. Mr. and Mrs. Fitch.
Sold to MTI, available to high schools next in the fall.
Mr. and Mrs. Fitch with John Lithgow and Jennifer Ely at Second Stage. Terrific show, great fun. It's always a pleasure seeing you, Douglas. Thank you.
Thank you. This was a really nice interview.
Hi, Andrew here for Theater Talk. We just took in almost all of the public theaters under the Radar Festival and PS 122's Coil. We got a chance to catch up with some of the directors of our favorite productions and ask them some questions. Let's see what happened.
We need to know, give us the elevator pitch. We're top executives at the National Theater of Yugoslavia or somewhere, and we want just a real quick elevator pitch of ads.
How long's the ride? Is it a long elevator ride?
This is what happens when I get in front of producers. It's great.
It's big, cheap theater. You can do it on a dime. There's no set.
It's really, it's a show, and
I actually did something like this. At one point, I thought it would be good to have Paris Hilton do an ad. I met someone at an opening who said, this is her number, call her up. And so
there's 6 people. There's no turnaround time. All the stuff travels in one suitcase. We're cool people, and it's very accessible. And there's a smart video idea, so you get to tap into, we're smart and hip, and you also get to tap into people who love The Big Lebowski. So basically, I call it an experimental theater version of The Big Lebowski. If you like those things, you're going to have a good time at LA Party.
We're on the stage, and it's about the Chautauqua, the Chautauqua lectures.
Of course, I thought about this pitch. Is the elevator ride still going, right? Okay, yeah. So I did a kind of elevator pitch phone call, and when the beep came, I left a message that went something like this. Hey, Paris. This is Rich Maxwell. I'm a director in New York. I'm making a video, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. So give me a call.
That's sort of how I get when I get in front of anyone important that has money.
For more tips on how to get your off-Broadway show off and running, make sure to visit theatertalk.org.
For more videos from us.
And that's Theater Talk with an ER, not an RE.
Yeah, because we're American.
Not British.
Yep.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.